This is a topic that I'm actually pretty excited about. Information security is something that I've always had an interest in. Going all the way back in high school, my first basic program was a password program, so I've always somehow been attracted to this topic, and that's why I've taken on the role at DI of being the Chief Security Officer. I took classes in security in college, so it's just a topic that I get excited about. So.
Yeah, me too. I've also really enjoyed security, first as a geek, computer geek in college, actually studying how to break systems, how exploits work in protocols, and how do you exploit software bugs. There's a great class called Computer Network Security taught by Ron Rivest. That's a name if you've ever heard of RSA encryption. He's the R in RSA. And you learn how to break these things. That's kind of neat. And actually, when we were learning how to break things, we learned about famous attacks. And if you Google Zanarotti attack, you'll actually find a description of an attack on a Kerberos key distribution center. So that's kind of a neat little thing. I did not know at the time, but later on, it's like, oh, that's Zanarotti. All right.
Okay. Statute of limitations is already over at this point.
So we're clear. But moving beyond, just sort of the engineering interest of that, which is still important, and in our engineering team, we have to worry about those things. You have to design software securely. It goes beyond that. It's really a whole process. Information security as a whole. How do you keep an organization safe? And what are the threats, and what are we going to do about it? So let's talk about that.
Okay, thank you. As you might very well be aware, cybersecurity threats are a big problem. It's a big industry. You have $7 billion lost to cybercrime. It's only going to be going up. We've heard, of DI customers getting hit. We have to reinstall the software because they had a ransomware attack. Both hospitals and the liquor industry are targets for people. And so the question is, how do you protect yourself? How do you keep your organization from getting hit, or if it gets hit, what can you do about it? So that's what we'll be talking about. We'll be talking about what DI is doing. There are many different approaches that are appropriate for what it is. So, well, first is to understand what the threats are. A threat model is extremely important to understand what you're up against. And ransomware is a big issue because people can, take control of your systems and ransom it for money. Outright theft can come in, fake invoices or other things like that, so they actually steal money from your company. Loss of confidential information, especially in healthcare. PHI, I would think most people are in the healthcare arena are very aware of this. So one question you have to understand is, who is the adversary? Ransomware is a certain amount of sophistication to them. Certain people, like the government has to worry about state actors, which is even a level above. So you have to understand who you're dealing with and react and protect your organizations appropriately. So, but at the same time, you have to balance security and convenience. So this is a photo of NORAD. So I could design an extremely secure computer system by taking a PC, put it in NORAD. You have armed guards around the place. You have armed guards to watch the other armed guards. No network connections. Put it into a nice Faraday cage, completely metal enclosure. Put soundproofing in it. Extremely secure. Not so useful, not very convenient. You're not going to be able to get in, do stuff with it. But it might actually be appropriate if what you're protecting is like the root signing keys for the internet name system. And they probably have security close to that. So, you have to balance the security and the convenience so that you can get the work done, but get it secure and get it done. And you're never going to have perfect security. And you just have to understand that and build into your systems the kind of resilience and ability to handle things as they come up. So,
So what's the #1 vulnerability? It's us, people. Now, as an introvert and sometimes misanthrope, that works out pretty well for my mentality. But people also are designing these systems that are vulnerable as well. So when we talk about people being a vulnerability, they're also our biggest asset. You can't get rid of them. You can't do any work. But people need access to things. As Stan said, a secure system in a concrete bunker is not very good. You need access. People tend to be trusting, and they want to trust their coworkers to get their job done. They're not necessarily security conscious. And then there's the problem of social engineering. Someone's trying to talk to you and say, hey, I need this information. I'm really important. I'm your boss. I'm your boss's assistant or whatever. Try to rush you through something, make you emotional, and get something away from you that way. If you're really into this topic, there's a great podcast called Darknet Diaries. I'll just put it. It's not mine. It's not my podcast. I don't have a podcast. But it's a neat look into how people in that space operate. So what do we do about this vulnerability? We can't get rid of the people. No, it doesn't work. But you can educate people. And this is something that hopefully organizations are doing. And hopefully when they do it, you don't roll your eyes too much. Right? It's difficult to talk to people about this because it gets a little boring kind of quick. Because security is like this thing that gets in your way. You have to do enough of it so you're safe, but really you want to get your job done. So how do you balance that? It's tricky. So for DI, what our approach has been is we have weekly or bi-weekly all-hands meetings, and we'll include like a 2-minute security blurb of some kind. In fact, why don't we give them an example of one?
Okay, yeah. Here's one I did on social engineering. And the definition of social engineering is an attempt to control the social behavior, get somebody to do something. It relies on trust. It relies on forming a relationship with you, and also trying to look into people's satisfaction. So trying to figure out ways to get a human to do something that they probably shouldn't actually do. So. Like sales calls, trying to extract information about your organization. You might have people asking, for your IT help desk, get information. Maybe, they want to, it's a robocall pretending to be your bank, and they want your credit card number or the like. So, sometimes it's like, somebody claiming to be the VP saying, oh, I need to reset a password. And can you just do this for me because there's a big presentation going on and I'll be fired, all that type of stuff. Or maybe just, hey, free USB key in the parking lot, or a free USB key getting it mailed to you. You put it into your PC gets compromised, then they get in that way. So sort of just taking the human factors and using that. So.
That reminds me of an email I got just recently from fred.powers at... I don't think it was actually dimness.com, come to think of it. He really wanted me to get one of those Apple gift cards, urgently right now. I was like, well, this is the boss, man. He wants them. Okay, I guess we'll, So you have to watch out for things like that. That has definitely happened to us. People go on your website and like, who's in charge of the company? Great. And we'll go to LinkedIn, find out who works at that company, and just spam all those people trying to get them to install something or buy gift cards or something like that.
Right. So just, and then how do you, we talk to the employees about how to protect themselves, things to say. So-and-so don't say that they're on holiday. Just say, can I take a message? Can I have contact details? If you're unsure, check in with people. Just trust what you think. So.
Yeah, if you got that niggling feeling that something's not right, it's probably not right.
Yeah. So. And this is, historically, this education has been proven as the #1 thing to do. One example from the political sphere is the DNC hack. This is in 2016. The Russians managed to get, known as Fancy Bear, managed to send phishing emails to the Democratic National Committee. It was a phishing attack that succeeded. So what did the DNC do after that? They brought in a former Yahoo executive who really drilled into all the people there, the education. They had frequent training sessions. They really changed a little bit of the culture of the organization to really be aware of it, even to the point that something that accidentally happened. You know, people were worried about something that was happening when it really was just not an actual hack. So they had no big hacks against them in the 2020 election, and they were going up against, you know, a state actor, basically, you know, one of the Russian hacking groups for the Russian state. So education should probably be one of your highest things to look at, because the humans are one of your best things to protect in order to keep them from getting in. So.
You know, this name Fancy Bear, I can't let this go. So cyber researchers, when they're studying advanced persistent threat actors, like usually state actors or state-sponsored actors, they sort of see a pattern of access. No one like advertises, hey, this was Russia, right? They come up with things that say, this is probably from this state or this group, and they give them names, like DIUC22, not very interesting. They say, well, what if they're Soviet Union, Fancy Bear. Now, I don't know where the artwork came from. That's a step beyond what I was expecting to see, but you do see these crazy names in the news like that. So how do people get in? Stan talked about social engineering as a way of getting in. You know, maybe there's software vulnerabilities. That's, you know, we're always saying, you know, update your software. Like if it says update, click the update button. You've got to keep that up to date because people write software and people are the #1 vulnerability, right? So you want to do that. But there are some other things that one of my pet peeves is reuse passwords. This is really amazingly unsafe. So you're like, well, I've got a really complicated password. This is great. But I have to log into a lot of websites, personal websites, finance websites, work websites. I'm just going to use that same password because it's really hard to remember. It's a really great password, right? The problem is if any of those sites are compromised, and probably one of them will be, and then someone gets your password, the first thing people do is try it everywhere. There was a big hack couple times against LinkedIn in terms of recovering their password database. They got the password hashes, which is not the actual password, it's sort of a derivative of it. But you spend enough computing time and you can crack them. So people crack these passwords, and then they were like, no, I have an email address and I have a password. It works on LinkedIn. Let's see where else it worked. And lo and behold, they can get access all over the place. So #1 thing is never reuse a password. Phishing is related to software engineering. People are sending you emails trying to get you to click on stuff. And sometimes they're laughable. They're like, oh, the English is terrible. There's no way this is really from Amazon. But I will tell you that at some point, most of us will probably click on a link that we're not supposed to. Right? If it comes in a moment of stress, you're expecting a package from Amazon, it's got to get here before I leave town, it says it's from Amazon, it was well done, and you click. Even cyber researchers do this, right? Like, we are just human. But you gotta try. You gotta say, well, where is this going? Is this actually, does this make sense? If you're not sure, trust your gut and think about it. We encourage our staff at DI to forward us all sorts of strange and suspicious emails, pick up the phone and call somebody, and happen all the time we're getting these reports. And then we use them in our bi-weekly meetings. Once they're in, they would like to move around inside your network. All right? And you might be able to do that by, you have write access to file servers. You can just sort of, put a tasty looking file like, bonus package.exe, and everyone who has access to the file share is like, oh yeah, I want my bonus, and then they run it, and now you've managed to spread it that way. Or, all these machines have remote desktop access, and you've got credentials on their Active Directory, and yeah, you can log into all these different machines, so the stolen credentials can be used on all these different machines. Sometimes people have things that store passwords or access tokens, like I've got an API token for GitHub, and it wasn't stored securely, so once they got into my machine, they could hop further. So these are things that happen, and the model you can kind of think of is you don't want to be like crunchy on the outside and squishy in the middle, right? Like just having a firewall is not sufficient. You need to not trust anything internally, and what we do at DI is we will segregate systems. So the servers are in one place, and the servers can't talk to each other unless it's explicitly allowed. Customer sites are isolated further. And we try to think about what would an adversary do if they got in, where could they go? There are other things we do too. We happen to hate Windows servers. I think, honestly, this is just us being Unix dorks. But the upshot has been that we've sidestepped a whole area of concern. And we obviously use Windows all over the place. And we use Windows in quality assurance testing and things like that. But so that's something that's a little different and just makes us a little harder to attack. We're not really heavy on file shares. We instead have our own sort of system for sharing information and sharing files. That is not the typical thing adversaries would see. And then on our Unix side of the house, we're not using passwords for logging into systems. You have to have an SSH key pair. And if it's anything interesting, you have to be able to do two-factor as well.
So yeah, so in terms of the resilience, recovery, backups are extremely important. You also want to have a plan on if, when things happen. I am, from the days of mainframes, one of my favorite is Multics, and Multics' motto was, if it's not on tape, it's not saved. If you wrote a file out on Multics, it would be on tape within 30 minutes. So, having your data somewhere safe is extremely important, and you want to think about it, because that will allow you to recover not only from a ransomware attack, but also fire or other damaging disasters that might happen. So you want to think about the recovery side of things before they happen. So for DI, what do? We do hourly snapshots up to a certain amount, like for the past day. That allows people to sort of recover from mistakes. Like they accidentally delete a file, and we get requests for that from time. The snapshots are read-only on sites, so that if you get into a system and completely wipe it out, you can't wipe out the backups. You would have to go in somewhere else to be able to write or destroy those. We have backup servers, which is yet another layer of things where the data gets stored, which also have a different ways in. And then for important files, like all the software that we create in terms of the consultants, all the marker files, integrator files, they're not that much data, but they're sort of the crown jewels, or they would be the most difficult to recreate. We archive them in several different other places. So that would be the really, disaster recovery setup, so that we could recover from a huge problem. And so it's sort of the crown jewels that we keep in different places.
If you like disaster movies, then planning for things that can go wrong to your company is a great time.
Yeah.
There are some things that we can do with, if we're using our software in particular to secure things. And just looking at how to authenticate to Diveline, how do you know the users who they're supposed to say, who they say they are? We have a couple different approaches. One is the Diveline storing the passwords, has its own password database, has its own password hash database. It doesn't actually record the passwords. A lot of people have Active Directory or some other LDAP system, or you're using our DLCGI or OpenID Connect, where there is another party that's doing the authentication for us. And for all of these, there's some things we try to do. If you're having Diveline manage the passwords, which often will make sense when you have external users coming in. Internal users, you're usually going to use your centralized authentication in some form. But we have ways of setting character minimums, password policies, and locking things out after failures. And this is what we offer in the software to you, and this is what we do when we host for customers as well, if they're using passwords.
By default.
By default, out of the gate. For all of our, we also have features for doing, when we're hosted 2FA, or if you're using OpenID Connect. And this is going to, obviously it's higher security, it's harder to compromise a site if you have to have two factors. You can't just guess a password, you have to also have something. And we do this for all of the sites that are HIPAA compliant or that have been marked as high security sites. And one of the interesting things about this is this can actually reveal intrusions. When we look at, someone's registered a new 2FA device, that's unexpected, or there have been a lot of 2FA failures, which suggests that a password is known, but the 2FA device isn't working. So we'll call that staff member and say, hey, is everything all right? And that hasn't been for us, but that is a way that you can find vulnerabilities. In fact, the SolarWinds hack, which was a big deal several years ago, it was FireEye, right?
FireEye found it. Yeah.
Found it because of some interesting 2FA activity. So what we use is we have, when we're hosted, we have support for Duo Security or Google Authenticator type things. for Diveline and for SSH access to all of our sites. But we also have OpenID Connect, which we talked about yesterday, which can talk to Azure AD and other such systems, which all of you can use now when trying to secure a system. And this is the whole thing. You know, it's great centralized security, multi-factor, and single sign-on, so it's easier for your legitimate users.
And another thing to do, of course, is monitor what's going on your systems. We monitor at DI. We log the logins. We have password changes. We see those password changes. So if we see unusual activity, we can handle them. User lockouts. We do get lockouts from people trying to guess passwords from the web at times, and it's good to be aware of what's going on. And just by keeping a track on things, monitoring it, you can also see other things like downtime of systems. So we have a whole monitoring system just to keep us informed about what's happening. So, and just keep in mind that security is a process. It's not an end state. You don't get to be secure. It's something that's continual. The attacks are going to change. The defenses will evolve. You can go back to the example of tanks versus tank weapons. The software is going to evolve for both the attackers and the defenders, and you just have to keep up to date with it and keep an eye on things. So it's also something where you can constantly improve. You can always get yourself to the next level of security. It takes time to do that, but it's going to be worth it. And also, just trust your gut. If something feels wrong in terms of either, in terms of emails or other things coming in, or you as a system administrator, you feel like something is off, trust your gut and sort of investigate and see what you can do about it before it becomes a problem. So.
Great. And if you would like to talk to us further about any of this stuff, feel free. You know where to find us. Thanks, everyone.